Tonight, a speech for the ages.
What will President Trump talk about during his primetime address to the nation?
He is supposed to talk about some declassified information investigations.
I think you're going to have hard evidence of fraud during the 2020 election.
Any idea what you might hear? Anything that could change your mind about what happened in 2020? I'll wait to hear what he says to back it up.
Say it to the public. Come on. We're big boys and girls. We can take it.
It's really, really big news. It doesn't get bigger.
They pick primetime speeches because they're important.
I've never seen anything like it, quite frankly.
Who knows what they found?
Without free and fair elections, you don't have a country.
It was stolen.
I think it's going to be a smorgasbord.
The Democrats don't want to hear it.
I think it's pretty obvious they stole 2020.
I think when people say the facts, there's no amount of interpretation that the spin nicers can do.
It's going to be a very big announcement.
I'll leave it at that and let the American people judge, but I think there'll be plenty there.
Coverage begins at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Just 2 hours, Donald Trump will stand in front of a camera in the East Wing of the White House and lie to you, to me, the American people. In a primetime speech, the administration officials tells MS Now that the president will try to revive repeatedly debunked conspiracies about the 2020 election. And new today, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt spent her first briefing back from maternity leave by refusing to say whether Trump will accept the results of the midterms.
And there's a reason the president is reverting back to election conspiracies. The courts are shutting down his attempt to assert federal power over state-run elections. Judges have repeatedly blocked his administration's attempt to obtain unredacted voter rolls. They've also pushed back hard on his attacks on mail-in voting and other partisan measures to undermine free and fair elections.
Tonight's speech is also another example of Trump's misplaced priorities. Instead of ending his costly war of choice with Iran, or working with Congress on affordability, or dealing with a parasite living in our lettuce, how many of y'all had to throw away a lot of fruit and lettuce because of that parasite? I wish our government was on top of it. Trump is choosing instead to live in the past. A person close to the White House tells MS Now that Trump's speech is about, quote, personal vindication, and that his 2020 defeat still keeps him up at night. But this is much more than just revisionist history. It's another step towards an impending constitutional crisis. Trump is setting up a narrative to discredit future elections that don't go his way.
You and I, kindred souls, spirits in this crazy fight right now. I'm nervous not for what Donald Trump may ad lib or say, because I know what he's going to say. He's going to lie through every inch of his fiber. What I'm concerned about is how ready are we right now to get in position for the next 3 months, because this, as I said before, is the lead, the salvo for the executive orders and the decisions and the pronouncements that are going to come after this administration to justify putting troops at polling places, to justify taking data from election sites, or worse, saying, hey, there's too much foreign interference that our DNI is telling us about, that we have to shut down the election altogether.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Michael. You know, there is one part of this that is a story about sour grapes and a president that cannot let go the fact that he lost the 2020 election. And look, I was proud to have represented President Biden and the Democratic Party in defeating Donald Trump in those cases. But this is not just about the past. This is, Michael, as you say, about the future. It is about what we are doing for the next 3 and 4 months as we lead up to this election. Donald Trump is sowing the seeds today to challenge the outcome of elections when he loses. He's going to try to disrupt them. And when that fails, he's going to challenge them. He's going to say that they are the result of massive fraud. And we have seen what happens when he does that. He goes to court and he loses. And when that doesn't work, he resorts to extrajudicial means. So look, everyone who is ready to watch this speech, Donald Trump is going to lie. He lies about everything. He lies about his height. He lies about his weight. He lies about his health. He lies about his mental acuity. He lies about his relationship with foreign leaders. He lies like most people breathe air. And he's going to lie tonight about the elections. And we need to understand that this is not about fact-checking the occasional falsehood buried in truth. This is about one lie after another lie after another lie. I would hope, though I don't think it will be the case, that those local network outlets will simply label his clips lies.
It's Thursday, 16 July in the year of our Lord 2026. It's the evening here on Real America's Voice, and we're going to cover for the next couple hours, an hour pregame, go through the analysis before the president's address to the nation from the East Room of the White House. That will take place approximately 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Their speech is approximately 20 to 30 minutes long, and then we will have many of the analysts, and particularly people who have been working this problem on election security and to make sure that we have free and fair elections, will be joining us also. I just want to make sure everybody realizes we play these cold opens for a reason about information warfare, but I believe 100% of that was taken from the network that the White House thought it was a good idea to brief on what's going to happen tonight before it happened, MSNBC. And you see the hate and vitriol right there. The hate, he's a liar, everything's going to say he's a lie. This is about stealing elections, this is about stealing the midterm elections. Let's go to the White House. Our own Steve Gruber is there. Steve, thank you for being in D.C. this week. Very helpful. Put us in the room. The very historic speech about to take place moments from now in the East Room. What do you got for us, sir?
It's remarkable listening to that cold open, Steve, the refusal to accept facts. It doesn't matter what the president says tonight. They've labeled it as false. They've labeled it as him being obsessed with the 2020 election. He should be. If the 2020 election was not on the up and up, and let's be honest here, nobody believes Joe Biden got 81 million votes. Nobody. But you've got people like Murkowski and Tillis and Cornyn. There's no urgency here. None among the Republicans either, Steve. And that's my concern here today, because the Save America Act is probably the most critical piece of legislation in recent years, maybe in my lifetime. Because the one thing they said in that cold open that was true, it's about the future. It is about the future of this republic. There is no urgency here on Capitol Hill. I hope that those networks will listen to what is said tonight with a fair mind. But they clearly don't have an open mind, and that's the problem, because they regurgitate this stuff day after day, hour after hour. It's like a mama bird feeding the baby birds. They just take it. They don't ask questions. They just eat it. It doesn't matter what it is or where it comes from. They just eat it. There's no urgency in this place. They're going to take their month off in August. It's outrageous. And the question is there enough here tonight to convince enough fair-minded Americans of what the truth is about 2020, 2022, 2024, and, yes, the future?
Steve, I don't know if it's going to be in tonight's speech. I keep telling people, hey, this is the kickoff. This is part of a process, and this process is going to continue on because Pulte and Real America's Voice's John Solomon, John's only been ahead of the task force about 3.5 weeks. I think Pulte's been there for 4 weeks. They've gone through millions of pages. I think they're going to release thousands of pages of, and some of that will be redacted, but declassified information about this. But Michigan, I think either tonight or in the future will come up. In Michigan itself, we saw the stealing of the 2020 election in broad daylight. Sir, your thoughts?
Yeah, we watched those vans roll in at 3 a.m, unload thousands of ballots there in Detroit. We watched the election workers, the Democrat election workers, paper over the glass so that the Republicans couldn't watch what they were doing. The Republicans that were given the job of oversight blocked from that room. It was outrageous. And then, of course, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, they all stopped counting at the same time. We saw it happen in real time. And magically, and yes, I say magically, Joe Biden came from behind and somehow, they say, won the election. But it concerns me, again, when I look at senators from Alaska, where we are told maybe it was breached by Chinese tech pirates to get into the databases of voting, maybe 18 states. I think we'll hear that tonight. How can Lisa Murkowski sit on the sideline and say no to the SAVE Act when her state may have been one of those that was targeted? We'll find out tonight. And again, no fair-minded person, Steve, believes that Joe Biden got 81 million votes, not one. And I hope there are enough people out there that look at the facts and say, you know what? I didn't think that it was that way, but now I look at the facts. And I hope that Solomon and the others release and declassify enough material here so that it's irrefutable. Maybe it's the kickoff, but I hope it's a kickoff that goes through the uprights.
Steve, just hang around. We're going to come back to you. Damon Roberts. Damon, your thoughts. How do you think this is going to be framed tonight? The mainstream media, first off, ABC News has already informed us, and CBS, that they're not going to cover it. You see MSNBC has already framed this as a pack of lies and just more of the madness of Donald Trump. Your thoughts about this and what you're expecting tonight and how it will be framed?
Yeah, I think Steve said it well. Both Steves, you and Steve Gruber, said it well. The president tonight, Steve, has two absolutely detestable enemies of ours to address. I don't know which one's a bigger threat. They're both complicit. You have China and you have the American media, like you just said. First, on the China thing, when you think back now, if the president's going to say what we've heard he's going to say today, when you think back on the end of Trump 45, it's hard to not realize now what the ultimate double whammy that he was hit with. China, now we're going to hear tonight, was hacking maybe voter systems, meanwhile their virus was tearing through our economy, the lab leak origins, the cover-up, the timing, all of it. You can't look back now and say it was just bad luck for America. It was more of like a perfect storm. We had mail-in chaos, suppression, in-person voting, all of it to keep Trump from winning re-election. Two prongs of the same spear aimed at the heart of this republic. So I think the president has both of those to address tonight. And the media, they're not going to show the president tonight. The president is addressing the nation. Whatever those media channels are going to put on tonight, it's not as important as what the president's going to talk about. I don't care what you feel about him. I don't care what the subject matter is, but yet they're going to spend, and these are the same networks, by the way, who put shows like The View on and tell us that that's we're supposed to be watching that as legitimate news. But they'll spend hours after he's done with his 20, 30 minutes spending every second that they have on the free public airways telling us like your opening laid out. So to me, those are the president's two targets tonight. Maybe he speaks on Iran, but I think those are the things. And the real question for the American people is, how much of this do they want to put up with, as far as, is the president drop any bombshells about what our own government knew and maybe hid? And so will voters accept that our intelligence gatekeepers might be deciding what truths are fit for public consumption and which ones are not? So for me, those are all the questions tonight.
Damon, we're going to go to commercial break. I think it's brilliant tying the pandemic together with the CCP's efforts that we'll hear tonight, and even more of getting rid of Donald Trump. Donald Trump's the worst nightmare that ever come to them, someone that was not prepared to play games with the established order and not see the managed decline of the country. Caitlin Collins did ask, I thought, a very good question of Caroline today. And Caroline, I thought, had a great answer. She said, call DOJ, call the Attorney General, don't ask me. Your thoughts about when are we going to start? We got about a minute. When do we start seeing some people held accountable for this? And I mean both either criminal charges or people in the intelligence community fired, sir.
Oh, well, Steve, that's a question I can't answer you. I've been having John Solomon on this show for a bunch of years, too, and I ask him that seemingly every time. I don't know the answer, but I think the reality of what we have to, we're kind of facing tonight is that we're living in a reality now where formal power and real power are diverging. If some of what we're hearing about what the CIA may have known and may have kept because they were worried about how it was going to affect the outcome, I mean, that's as much voter suppression by omission as maybe anything else we're going to hear tonight. So as far as handcuffs and people going to jail, I don't have an answer for that on any topic because we've been waiting for that for many things. But the whole who controls the power in this country and who's really running the country, to me, is as important as a question tonight.
Damon, hang around. We got Steve Brewer at the White House. Neil McCabe's over there, too. Damon Roberts is with us. We've got David Rodriguez. Nino is with us. Brian Kennedy for the pregame. Plus, I think we got Sally Grubbs. Got a bunch of folks down in Georgia. Going to have some from Arizona. We're locked and loaded tonight. Cleta and Posobiec are going to join us from London right after the president's address. President's address will take place in about 45 minutes. 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It's supposed to take about 20 to 30 minutes. And we're going to take a short commercial break. I want to thank Birch Gold as our sponsor. Short commercial break. Back in the War Room, Real America's Voice coverage of President Trump's address to the nation.
Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, welcome back. President will address the nation in approximately 45 minutes. We've got some of the top thinkers and people involved on the action side of this, both before the speech and after the speech. I want to go to David Rodriguez. Nino, what are you looking for tonight, sir?
Well, the first thing he's doing is exposing the mainstream media, which is great, right? We want that to happen. I've always been told a stolen election, Steve, is the same as a nuclear attack militarily. So NBC, ABC, there's their notice. I'd be looking at not your licenses just being pulled, but this could be war crimes. And I think that's the direction this is going. Everyone knows this is probably going to have to go military. There will probably be a stop or a delay in the midterms, national security emergency. All these things are probably going to come into play, and I'm excited about it. And more than ever, let me tell you, folks, Trump has to bring the receipts tonight. He has to go hard in the paint, and he's got to bring graphs, charts, and officials up there with him and really stick it home.
I think part of, by the way, I think part of the documentation, the receipts, the charts, all that, I think that actually may be tomorrow morning. I think he's giving an overall address. He's going to point out a lot of this. And I think they've got, he's going to reference this in the speech, but I do believe what you're saying. When you say go hard in the paint, we've messed around for this for years now, right? It's 6 years after the fact, I think 5.5, 6 years after the fact. What do you mean? And particularly when we talk about the midterms, because that's what they're melting down about. What do you think this portends? Because this is the start of a process. There's going to be more released tomorrow. There's going to be more, I think, released next week. What do you think this? What does this portend for this midterm election, which is essentially slightly over 100 days away, and people start voting? I think early voting starts in middle of September, so we're 60 days away from early voting in certain locations. What do you think this means for the midterms?
I think it needs to be handled in the way that as he brings the receipts in tonight, to me, Trump is crossing the Delaware tonight. And I think most of America is behind this man. Those who believe that the 2020 election was not stolen, it was fair, they're a little bit, sorry, nobody buys that. Nobody buys that. So what he's going to be doing tonight is consequential for what's coming in the midterms. You got to have the receipts. You cannot have a country if you have stolen elections. He's got to bring the receipts, the officials, the graphs, the charts, the whole shebang. And then that right there will set precedents to where we're going in the midterms. And people will understand, like, hey, we can't go forward like this. A country cannot move forward like this. There's no way possible. So he's got to go hard. He's got to drive it home. Like in boxing, they say it in boxing, you got to dress him up before you take him out. He's got to set the table. He's got to get on base. That's what we're doing tonight. This is huge.
A national security emergency, because right now the SAVE Act is not going anywhere. The thought that was put out today earlier was they're going to put $10 billion into a reconciliation bill, and that reconciliation bill is going to tempt states that voluntarily are going to come forward because they want the money to make the type of changes we're talking about. And I think most people would say, well, I'm not so sure New York and Illinois and California and these places, these sanctuary states are going to, for $1 billion or $500 million, are going to step forward and make any changes, because then they wouldn't be able to steal elections. And so stealing elections is much higher than taking $500 million in some sort of government loan program. What do you think about this building a case as a predicate for a national security emergency?
Yeah, he's got to expose them, expose Congress. He's got to show them. He's got to show what they're doing. Of course, even if this did pass, it would get held up in court. It wouldn't make it this cycle anyway, most likely. So all he's doing is showing the people, us, the court of public opinion, like, hey, we can't get anything done with the government we have. This has got to take new measures, and which is the direction he is going. So I'm already on the other end of this. I'm excited about this, to be quite honest with you, Steve. It's go time. I'm ready. And this is all I've been talking about for 6 years, and we're finally here. It's a great time. Yeah. I'm excited because they're going to lose bad. And, you see Obama trying to get a hold of the ball. I mean, Obama trying to get ahead of the ball and, oh, this is fake. He's crazy. He's a tyrannical dictator.
Yeah.
Look, these people are nuts, and they have nothing else but lies to stand on. and that foundation is going to fall apart really fast. So I'm excited, Steve, as you should be too. We all should be, because we win. We win. And we have a president with balls. That's what I like.
Nino, hang around. I'm going to go to Brian Kennedy. Brian, Nino's point is well taken, because as Neil McCabe told us, he's never seen the briefing room so angry as they were today. And if you've watched MSNBC and these channels, in the different shows and the hosts that come on, and like Mark Elias, they are seething with anger that this is even being done, correct? They know how catastrophic this is, how central to their program, because if they can't cheat, they can't win. And it's pretty obvious about that. Your thoughts about tonight, how important is it? And particularly, you're the co-founder of the great group that focuses on the danger of the Chinese Communist Party as an existential threat to the United States. If it's true and it's brought up that China is intimately involved in this, what do you think that means?
Well, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me on. First of all, the media is going crazy because they've been complicit in gaslighting the American people over the 2020 election. So they're all in. They're going to stay all in on this. What I'm looking forward to tonight, though, is the president laying out for the American people what communist China did in 2020. Not merely did they inflict COVID upon the United States and the world, but they were actively engaged in a people's war against the United States, which they declared in May of 2019. And then they took a series of steps to make sure that Donald Trump could not win in 2020. And we don't know today, but hopefully we're going to start learning tonight just what the Chinese were engaged in. Were they penetrating the voting systems of the United States? We know they were accessing databases. We know they could acquire databases. They have the largest cyber army in the world with 600,000 to 1 million men. They're, I think, easily the most sophisticated intelligence service in the world. They're determined to take down the United States. The one man who is standing in their way is Donald Trump. And so not merely in 2020, but they went after him in 2024, and they're still going after him. And I hope after the president lays out what they did in 2020, after he lays that out tonight, again, I think this is really only round one of what's going to happen here. He needs to explain to the American people at some point what communist China did and what he's going to do to protect our elections. This is not a theoretical matter. This is not just about 2020. It's about whether we can have safe and secure elections. We have an electronic voting system that is vulnerable to cyber attack. We have a banking system that is vulnerable to cyber attack and AI, and every cybersecurity measure is put in place to protect our banking system. We don't have that when it comes to our voting system. And the ability of communist China to influence the election, I think, is something we're going to hear about tonight. And I think we're going to hear that the U.S. government did not do everything in its power to defend the American people. On a going forward basis, the president needs to lay out how he plans to make sure we have free and fair elections. That's not going to be an easy thing. It's going to be a controversial thing, but it's the central fight we need to have. If we don't have fair elections, we don't have a country. And the republic absolutely requires this fight that we're about to have. This is going to be, in my opinion, the most historic address history will someday recall for what happens tonight.
At least what the action that it initiates tonight. I've got to go back. You say media is complicit, and that's why they're so angry. Damon Roberts brought up at the beginning, I think, a brilliant point that people kind of forget. After they turned down the Lighthizer deal we worked 2 years on, and they had agreed to up to the end in May of 2019, declared people's war on us, two things happened. First was the pandemic to get rid of Trump, and then it was the stealing of the election. And they're both inextricably linked because the pandemic caused so many radical changes to the voting process. How are we going to hold them accountable if the media was complicit in both of those? And you could actually argue maybe even worse in the pandemic than they were in the election. In the election, they were terrible, sir.
No, I think that's right. Look, we should be reviewing all of these, the media itself and whether or not they deserve to have the protections they do. We want a free media that's actually out there freely telling the truth. But as you often say on the War Room, these are just simply propaganda arms of the Democratic and now the American Communist Party here. The Democratic Socialists of America, they're happy to have this kind of a media. And I fear the country will not survive with this kind of media in place. All they do is spread lies after lies, and the time has come for us to make sure that they're not able to do that freely. If they want to buy time the way everybody else does, they can certainly do that. But they are certainly complicit in all this.
Brian, is it strike you as ironic at the very moment that you've had the Committee on the Present Danger, one of the co-founders, but we've been arguing for years the reality of Marxism, the reality of the state, the state-controlled communism or state industry, state capitalism that the Chinese Communist Party use. That finally we're coming to a night where the president actually starts to address that. With Xi, I guess, still on the books having a state visit in about 2 months, sir.
Well, you saw the president's Truth Social a few days ago where he showed pictures of his trip to Beijing. And one wonders if he wasn't sending a signal that after what he says tonight, will Secretary Xi be welcome in the United States? In my humble opinion, the secretary is not welcome here in the United States. Shouldn't be coming to this country, because until they're willing to repeal the People's War against the United States and start taking concrete steps, they're not welcome.
Brian, hang on one second. Short commercial break. Back to Real America's Voice live coverage of the address to the nation.
Regarding the president's speech tonight, he's been in office over 540 days now. If what he says is tonight is backed up by evidence, why hasn't anyone been charged?
Well, he hasn't revealed it yet. He hasn't declassified the documents yet, and you will see what he says tonight, and then we'll move forward appropriately from there.
Tonight from the Justice Department?
I don't speak on behalf of the Justice Department, Caitlin, you know that. Rachel.
By evidence, will there be charges?
You'll have to ask the Justice Department. I don't charge people. I just speak on behalf of the president.
When we're talking about conspiracy theorists as it pertains to the 2020 election, you guys know this. Probably everybody listening and your own families, your own neighbors, there are folks that believe a great many of these things. They've heard a great many of these things from a lot of the folks that, for example, were at this White House briefing on Monday, among those 24. And so tonight, the President of the United States, on our team's reporting, we are told that in deliberations, there are a great number of past kind of conspiracy theories related to China, related to Venezuela, the idea that Smartmatic and Dominion were using code that was stemming from 20 years ago when 3 Venezuelan nationals first started Smartmatic, and that it was all in an effort to ultimately someday rig U.S. presidential elections. We don't know exactly what the president is going to say tonight, but from our reporting, we are told by multiple sources that the president is prepared to take a significant step in telling the American public that foreign governments have interfered with past elections, including the 2021.
Vaughn, was your sense that these individuals were at the White House to be given kind of a preview, the way that the State of the Union would be previewed among broadcast anchors, and to help them as they go out among their influencer channels? Or was it more of a strategy session to get together and talk about the various plans that they have to disrupt the elections?
No, it is the first point that you made, the suggestion that folks were essentially brought into the room to have a better understanding of what was going to come. And that was the reason for non-disclosure agreements here this week. And yet what, in a recording that MS Now that we have obtained from one of those activists that was a part of that briefing, they went and told supporters of their local group in Pennsylvania that the material that they were briefed on had already been all public. And a large part of that had been made public previously from documents that had been brought to the attention by this guy, John Solomon. He used to be a conservative journalist. He actually joined the White House 1 month ago as a special government employee, tasked with, along with Acting Director of National Intelligence, Bill Pulte, to essentially go through raw material and tell the president what they wanted to declassify. So I think it was noteworthy from our sources from inside of this briefing that there was no new material, but instead they were waiting themselves for this would-be document dump dump because the two men that have been brought in, I am told, into the White House to essentially do the president's bidding and releasing these documents are folks that only took the keys, and it's still questionable whether they even got security clearances just 1 month ago. And the one other point I want to make, guys, I had a conversation with an active administration official who made very clear to me that they were a part of deliberations of this raw intelligence material, and that they looked as much and as far through as they could to find anything that could help prove that Donald Trump actually won the 2020 election. And they said it is simply not there. And that's why John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, former director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, why they didn't release it in year number one. It just doesn't exist yet. The president is going to go and make this speech and document dump regardless.
Yeah, John Ratcliffe and the CIA have gone out of their way to suppress this information, including here in this past week. They're absolutely furious. You see how the mainstream remember? Look at it right there. They've been briefed by senior White House personnel. Senior White House personnel that are trying to kill this in the crib. It's not going to get killed in the crib. This is laying a predicate for what needs to be done in the future. Yes, are we going to relitigate 2020? Of course we're going to relitigate 2020. But is that the central beating heart of what this is about? No. This is about we will never again allow elections to be stolen like in 2020. And they can throw the toys out of the pram. They can get upset as they want. We are not going to let this happen to the midterm elections. Full stop. If you're not worried, if you don't have tens of thousands of illegal aliens on the voter rolls that are voting, why do you care if ICE shows up or not? If illegal aliens or aliens in this country that should not be voting, or why do you care if ICE is showing up at polling places just to check out, make sure everything's okay? Why? Why are you so concerned about that? You're concerned about that because if you don't cheat, you can't win. It's impossible. Joe Biden didn't get 81 million votes. Everyone knows that. It's blatant, but that is not the purpose. Is not to relitigate 2020. Although 2020 is going to get relitigated. The central part of this is about the Save America Act, and the Save America, the gutless, feckless Republicans. Here's what they're doing: instead of working to get support to pass this in the House and then in the Senate, what they're going to do with a country that's broke, that would be us, is in this $350 billion third reconciliation, all of money we don't have, that we have to borrow, $10 billion. They're going to make it voluntary. They're going to make Save America voluntary. So California, Illinois, New York, they're going to just run to go get $500 million. They don't care about $500 million. They don't care about $1 billion. They don't care about $10 billion. They care about remaining in power. And the way they remain in power is to wait for it, steal elections. And they've got a system of how they're going to steal it. And now they're in cahoots. They've been in cahoots with the mortal enemies of this country. Mortal enemies of this country being the Chinese Communist Party.
Yes,
Christina Bobb,
thank you.
You're over at Judicial Watch. Talk to me. What are you looking for? You've been on this from day one. I think you've been indicted in a couple of places, right? But you're working with Tom Fitton over Judicial. Tom will join us afterwards. So what are you looking for?
And we've already discussed most of them. One, exactly what you said, this has to be future looking. This is not to heal egos or wounds from 2020. That's in the past. Yes, I want the data. Yes, I want to see what they've got, but it has to be focused on preserving the integrity for our future elections. And then the other thing that I'd like to see, there's a lot of speculation about what he's going to put out. Personally, I don't want this to be solely foreign focused. I don't want to take away from the fact that I think the majority of the problems with 2020 were largely domestic. And if we had cleaned up the domestic issues, the foreign issues probably would have been stopped. Sure, I'm curious about any type of foreign influence and foreign intrusion into our elections. That's important. But if we had the proper domestic procedures in place, we were checking IDs, we were checking voter rolls, we had clean voter rolls, you have to be a citizen to vote, all of the safeguards that we want to put in place, the foreign interference would have significantly decreased. So personally, those are the two things I'd like to see come out of this.
But we have put forward in the Save America Act, he's put forward a very straightforward set of proposals to take care of those issues you're talking about. We can't get the Republican, forget the Democrats who are adamantly opposed to anything and will not discuss it. You can't even get the Republicans on the same page to the fact that they've come up today with an idea to spread some money around and make it voluntary. And by making it voluntary, that's going to work. Of course, everybody realizes that's absurd.
Right.
It's not going to happen. All your changes are changes that have to be made. They're all incorporated into Save America. That's why I believe we need more dramatic action. And I think tonight, because remember, tonight's just the starting point. It's a process, but it begins a process where then you can actually say, hey, we've got to take care of these elections. So we have to take care of them today, or they're going to steal the midterm elections, Christina.
I think that's exactly right. You know, every time I think the Republican Party is weak, they never cease to amaze me with how much weaker they can get. And they seem to be getting weaker, not stronger, at least over the last 6 years. You know, you can go back further than that, but certainly I've been in the trenches for the last 6 years on this. And I'm always shocked at how much they withstand. They're like the little kid at school that constantly gets bullied, and they're like, no, it's okay, I like it. It's like, what? Why aren't you pushing back? Why aren't you doing something? I think the Republican Party has proven themselves to be incredibly impotent. That's the only word that I can think to describe them, is they just, you know, they don't have the ability to do anything. They're incredibly weak. So, you know, whether they grow a spine and actually try to do something, I don't know. I do think the American people are going to demand it one way or another. You know, you already see them talking about pulling out of the economic system, going off the grid. There's been a trend about not paying taxes. I mean, there's a lot of ways that Americans, and I'm not recommending any of that, but there's a lot of ways that Americans are talking about you know, pulling out of the system. And the political system, Republicans and Democrats, the parties rely on the system for their power. So this will come to an end. It depends on how this, meaning the unlawful power that I think both parties are exerting over the American people. I do think it will come to an end. The question is, how painful is it going to be? And I don't think Americans are going to take it on the left or the right. I think most Americans are somewhere in between the two fighting factions, and they hate all of it.
You were at the RNC for a while. The RNC, the theory of their case, it seems to be go to court and let's sue, but they haven't been particularly successful in that. I don't believe, at least the way I follow it. Why they keep depending on just using the courts when that doesn't seem to be, because there's all these issues of standing, all these other issues. When you can take more direct action at the state legislature level, at the executive level, but you got to put your shoulder to. We're going to have people from Georgia here probably right after the speech and tell you the frustration because the Republican establishment in Georgia refuses to address any of these issues, ma'am.
Yeah. Well, I think they do it because it's easy, because they can file a bunch of lawsuits. They can go on TV and say, look, we have 100 lawsuits or whatever it is, you know, even if it's 100 lawsuits from the last 10 years that remain open for appeals and all that stuff. But it's easy to create data on what they're doing, meaning they're actually taking action. But if we're being honest, Democrats don't follow the law. So even if they get a good ruling that says, oh, you have to clean voter rolls, and Judicial Watch knows this very, very intimately, because we get a lot of really good rulings that say certain states or localities need to be cleaning their voter rolls, and it takes years for Judicial Watch to kind of force their hand on that. So for the RNC to get some type of ruling like that, then they go raise money off of it, they fundraise off of it, and they say they're doing things, and the wins that they have are largely fruitless because Democrats don't follow the law anyway. And so to me, it's a fundraising mechanism. If they say how many lawsuits they've got, it's a fundraising mechanism. And if you want to ask them to legislate, use their power to legislate, well, that's hard, because then you have to actually take a stand for something, and people have to know where you are on a position. That's why Thune's not even putting it to a vote in the Senate, because he doesn't want to, put the Republicans in a position where people will know where they stand on the law. Even if Republicans are going to lose that vote, put it to a vote so that the American people can see who's voting yay, who's voting nay, where they stand, and the voters can hold them accountable. But they're not even doing that.
On these, you've been doing these work on state by state. Do you agree with particularly the Speaker of the House, Johnson, that you could bribe, that you basically could take $10 billion, and that these blue states, and particularly these sanctuary cities, will somehow voluntarily then adapt the key elements of the Save America Act to get, $500 million or $1 billion of some sort of government program, ma'am?
Well, no, I don't think any blue state, maybe not even any red state, is going to voluntarily do it. I mean, there are red states where, like Tennessee is a great example. It's a very, very red state. And I know that there's an initiative within Tennessee to try to make their voter rolls more accessible so that nonprofits can actually go through and clean the voter rolls. Right now, it costs like $12,000 or something to get a copy of the voter rolls, and that's just too much money for volunteer individuals who just want to happen to check the work of their elected officials. And that's a red state, and they're not doing it. So no, I don't think anybody's going to just voluntarily do it. It has to be something that the voters make them do, and if Speaker Johnson and some of these other elected officials, whether it's state or federal level, don't agree to cooperate with the people, I mean, it's not going to go well for these elected leaders. They're counting on the voters just saying, shucks, okay, well, we'll just keep voting Republican because they're the lesser of two evils. People aren't going to do that anymore.
Real quickly, what's your social media? I know you got to bounce. What's your social media, ma'am?
Yep, at Christina_Bob on Instagram and X and Truth.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you coming on
Thank you.
tonight. Short commercial break. We're back. Real America's Voice coverage of the address to the nation next.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
There's some rumor out there, at least on the Republicans Against Trump was a very well-known anti-Trump organization. They're saying CNN's not going to cover it either. We'll check that out in a minute. Steve Gruber, before you go in, it's going to start momentarily. Neil McCabe's already in the room. Closing thoughts for the pregame, sir.
I think that we need to see some real evidence here, enough to convince fair-minded Americans that something went on in 2020. And as I stand here, Steve, I wonder how far back this goes. They say 2020, but what about 2018, 2016, 2014, 2012? How far back does this interference go? How serious is it? And how big of a threat has it been going back many years? That's what we have to come to terms with tonight, and I hope that they deliver on the goods. This has to be serious. It has to reveal things that are new, because otherwise it will just be a missed opportunity. We don't have the opportunity to miss again here tonight. We have to be on the money. We have to deliver. We have to make sure that the elections in this country, as so many of your guests said, without fair elections, we don't have a republic. It's urgent. It's go time.
Obviously, this all came about from this declassification effort led by John Solomon and Pulte when Pulte got to DNI. A lot of this, I think, is going to address the suppression of this information by the intelligence community. Your thoughts on that?
That's right. Yeah. Can you imagine the CIA or the FBI or other agencies that are supposed to be working for the American people, working for themselves, for their own self-interest, to undermine the duly elected president of the United States and then going after him for several years after he was a citizen again? If the intelligence community was burying this information time and again, it's time to clean house, as you say. And I go back to what Caitlin Collins asked today. Well, what about arrests? There has to be real accountability. The Americans have to see real accountability. If there's real evidence, then show us people in handcuffs, and let's move on to save the republic.
Gruber, thanks, and we'll see you after the president's address. Thank you so much. Steve Gruber at the White House. We also have Neil McCabe at the White House. Catherine Engelbrecht, if true the vote, if memory serves me correctly, you a couple of summers ago, you were put in a Texas prison for issues related to what the president's going to talk about tonight. Am I correct in remembering that correctly, ma'am?
You're definitely remembering correctly that I went to prison. That's true. Whether or not the president speaks of this, I don't know. We've certainly read the rumor mill that suggests that he's going to talk about Chinese interference, and that is the subject matter that wound me up in prison, where I can tell you that President Trump made calls to the warden to make sure that we were okay in a very upside down situation. But I'm very interested in what the president has to say tonight, and God bless America. I mean, we've just got to get it cleaned up. That the rolls from the rolls to the broken process, the republic can't continue with the elections in the state they're in.
I mean, but what efforts have you went to prison a couple of years ago? I mean, the president's talked tonight. I think it's going to be some aspect of this is going to be the Chinese Communist Party's direct involvement in what you've argued in a LA grand jury came out, I think 5 years ago. A grand jury indicted a guy about our voter rolls being on databases in China, the Chinese having access to it, that people, this is why people would go to polls and say, they say you can't vote because you've already voted. And they go, what? I haven't voted yet. All of that. We're now years into it. What action are you recommending has to be taken immediately? We got to stop playing games. We got to take action immediately. What are you recommending, Catherine?
Well, I think tonight is a huge step forward in just showing America what documents they have. And however that rolls out, you know, sunshine's always a good thing. But for where we are nearly 100 days out with our first state starting to vote on September the 18th, if you can imagine, the most important thing we can do now as Americans is pay attention, volunteer to work at the polls, because observation, it's just quantum mechanics. Observation changes things. If you have people who are engaged and willing to serve, that will make things go much more smoothly in the process. And working to clean the voter rolls. That window does not stay open for states much longer, but through right up until the election, individuals can still report problems with their registrations, and the states will still clean them one at a time. And so we are launching a new app called Scan, Check, Protect that will allow people to go directly to their state, look at their voter rolls, and take the steps necessary to report problems as they see them. So we are very much on top of this, and it is very definitely the 11th hour, but never too late.
Well, let me ask you that. We're 100 plus days from actually game day, election day. Like you said, it's 18 September. It's just over 2 months when people start early voting. Is there time? Because this is not going to be the end all and be all. Like I said, this starts a process of additional drops and information that are come out. Do we have enough time? Since Congress has screwed around for 2 years on Save America, since the state legislatures, and particularly, I know you're intimately involved in Georgia. We're going to have some of the leaders of the election integrity in Georgia join us after the talk. The establishment there has stopped everything. Is there enough time now to actually make the changes that have to be made to make sure that we have a free and fair election for these all-important midterms?
I mean, there's not time that means certainly whatever the president says will be followed with a push of lawsuits that are going to, you know, continue to scramble things up as long as they can to delay the justice that all Americans are looking for. And so to that end, I don't think that you're not going to be able to get big things, big new legislative pieces implemented by the midterms. But what you can do is send a very strong signal to all of America that the days of not looking and not acting are over. We are going to get on a straight and narrow path that serves all Americans. Whoever you vote for, you've got to know that your vote counts and is counted. And I think this is the beginning of a long overdue conversation. And I'm so looking forward to his remarks, and I'm looking forward to what follows, because this is the time for Americans to pick up the torch. This cannot be allowed to. We have legislative directorates that are guiding us from the early 90s, and we're looking at generative AI. I mean, we've got to get in sync, and so hopefully tonight's a part of that.
Catherine, where do people go? Social media, your coordinates, website, all the content you're putting out. Where do they go?
Go to @TrueTheVote or TrueTheVote.org.
Catherine Engelbert, a real warrior. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to a short commercial break. When we come back, the president should be moments from going into the East Room. We're going to cover it all, start to finish, and then we've got a fantastic group of people that are in this fight, not just talking about it. We'll start down in Georgia and go around. Also, hopefully we get Posobiec in London, Cleta Mitchell in London, to make sure you get the full scoop on what's going on. Short commercial break. We'll come back, hopefully, to the East Wing of the White House for the president's address to the nation. Next on Real America's Voice.
We united, strong and free.
Tonight, a speech for the ages.
What will President Trump talk about during his primetime address to the nation?
He is supposed to talk about some declassified information investigations.
I think you're going to have hard evidence of fraud during the 2020 election.
Any idea what you might hear? Anything that could change your mind about what happened in 2020. I'll wait to hear what he says to back it up.
Say it to the public. Come on. We're big boys and girls. We can take it.
It's really, really big news. It doesn't get bigger.
They pick primetime speeches because they're important.
I've never seen anything like it, quite frankly.
Who knows what they found?
Without free and fair elections, you don't have a country.
It was stolen.
I think it's going to be a smorgasbord.
The Democrats don't want to hear it.
I think it's pretty obvious they stole 2020.
I think when people see the facts, there's no amount of interpretation that the spin doctors can do.
It's going to be a very big announcement.
I'll leave it at that and let the American people judge, but I think there'll be plenty there.
Coverage begins at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, we're waiting the president in the East Room. They put the slate up right now. Should be momentarily, particularly if he's got, I think CBS is actually covering it. If you got broadcasts, you're going to hit your marks. One more time, Brian Kennedy, while we wait for the president to come out, your thoughts about particularly if the Chinese Communist Party becomes a big part of this tonight and the intelligence agencies and suppression of this. What are your thoughts? Where does that head?
I think people are going to wonder, Steve, what the president's going to do next if the Chinese Communist Party does feature prominently here. The War Room has been eloquent, and you've been eloquent in talking about the president as chief magistrate. If he's the chief magistrate and he's here to defend the laws of the United States, and we find out that there are election laws that are being violated, what then does he do next to ensure that in 2026 and in 2028 we have free and fair elections?
Okay,
there's a lot of talk about the powers.
Let's go right to the East Room.
Before we begin, I'm proud to report that our country is safer, stronger, and far wealthier than it has ever been before. We are doing great. Less than 2 years ago, we inherited an economic and social disaster. After the worst inflation in 48 years, the wide open borders with millions and millions of people pouring in from all over the world, including criminals of all types, and 11,888 murderers, many of whom killed more than one person. We had transgender for everybody, men and women's sports, crime ravaging our cities, and the whole world was laughing at us as a nation, but not anymore. 2 years ago, our country was dead. Now we are the hottest country anywhere in the world. America is respected like we have never been respected before. We have more money being invested in the United States than at any time in the history of our country. More Americans are working today than ever before. This week it was announced that inflation saw the largest monthly decline in more than 6 years. Just happened. It was just given out. The media reported it, and we accept it. The best in 6 years. The tax cuts in our great, big, beautiful bill are saving hardworking families thousands and thousands of dollars. Like with the provisions, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security for our great seniors, along with the interest deduction on a loan used to purchase a car, but only if that car is made in America, and a 100% expensing for our job-creating businesses. Our stock markets are at their highest point in many years, but we can actually say of all time. And your 401ks, pensions, and retirement accounts are setting records every single day, the highest in history. For years, we paid the highest price for prescription drugs anywhere in the world. Now we pay the lowest price under my most favored nation's policy, because I was able to get the rest of the world and the pharmaceutical companies to act responsibly. Drug prices are coming down by 70, 80, and 90%. TrumpRx.gov, this will ultimately reduce the cost of health care. You have to go to TrumpRx.gov and take advantage of it. But the cost of health care is coming way down because of what we've done with prescription drugs. And with Trump accounts, every child in America now has access to a tax-free investment account to save for their future. Billions and billions of dollars are being invested, put in by companies and individuals to take care of our children so that at age 18, they will have potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in their account, and they'll get off to a great start in life. So for that, go to TrumpAccounts.gov and sign up your child or any child who'd like to sign up. Our previously wide open borders have been transformed into the most secure borders in the history of our country, with 0 illegal aliens being admitted to the United States in the past 14 months. That is 0. Nobody thought it was possible. We had the worst border in the history of our country, and now we have the best. Crime is plummeting nationwide, with the murder rate at its lowest level since 1900, or more than 125 years ago. We're making a record investment in our armed forces, and we have the strongest and most powerful military by far anywhere in the world. I built it during my first term, and unfortunately, we're forced to use it now. We won in Venezuela, which is now working with us to produce millions and millions of barrels of oil. We are likewise winning big in Iran, and you will see the fruits of that labor very, very shortly. America is back and doing really well, but we still have a major challenge that must be urgently addressed, because no country can be great without fair and honest elections. You have to trust your country, because if there can be no trust, there can be no greatness. And that's very simple. No trust, no greatness. For many years, I've called for bold, swift, and decisive action to protect the integrity of America's elections. Every American deserves to know that when they cast their vote, that vote will be counted accurately in a system, and that is to make that system secure, one where cheating and interference are not just difficult, but virtually impossible. Unfortunately, the system we have today falls catastrophically short of that. They did not disclose to me as president or to anyone else, and to the best of our knowledge, they did not inform Congress. In fact, all they kept saying is, this is the most secure election in the history of our country, a standard, very pat line that was divvied out to say. The cover-up of this colossal security breach is even more disturbing in light of the additional information showing that China engaged in other election-related activities to undermine my first administration and our 2020 campaign. They did not want, and they just didn't want it. They fought like hell not to have it, Donald Trump, to win, and for good reason. As the documents we are releasing show, CIA reporting explicitly stated, and I quote, in mid-2018, the Chinese Communist Party's policy was to leverage all domestic and foreign elements that were opposed to the U.S. president in an effort to reduce the U.S. president's votes and make him resign or prevent his re-election. Isn't that nice? Also, in mid-2018, China was working to influence the results of the U.S. midterm elections and later the results of the 2020 presidential election itself. Separately, in mid-2019, the Chinese government's strategy against the United States was focused on undermining domestic confidence in the U.S. president. They wanted to just make you sound like your president wasn't so hot, when actually your president has done a great job, and they did everything possible to do exactly that. Going on, this document says, and this is by the CIA, the strategy included efforts to use Chinese contacts with big U.S. companies to influence U.S. business leaders to turn against the President of the United States of America. The Chinese government sought to identify U.S. journalists who had reported negatively on the U.S. president and pay them large sums of money to write more negative articles about him, as many as they could, and they didn't care what they said. The Chinese government wanted U.S. president to lose the next election, and the reason they wanted me to lose is because they knew I was wise to them, charged them billions and billions of dollars worth of tariffs, and built the strongest military anywhere in the world. We have the strongest military anywhere in the world. These are exact quotes from the CIA reporting. The name of the person doing the quote is now under review, but it gets even worse. Raw intelligence obtained by the FBI in 2020, yet buried by rogue bureaucrats, stated that China's activities even included an attempt to manufacture illegal ballots for Joe Biden. Documents show that during this period, dozens of significant CIA and NSA reports about China's election targeting were kept out of the presidential briefing. These were briefings I would get almost every day. Everything was kept out that was of importance. One email among intelligence analysts admitted that they had, quote, deliberately massaged the presidential daily briefing to withhold information regarding Chinese activities related to the election. Another official inside the FBI wrote that she was running, quote, a shadow government, unquote, to keep intelligence about China's election meddling from becoming known and to keep it away from the honorable press. Other officials who witnessed such efforts perceived the motivations to be blatantly political. Recently, we found significant numbers of burn bags in formation, and this is a group of bags that were used to destroy information given by President Barack Hussein Obama to be burned. It was supposed to be burned. These bags were supposed to be at a different level by different people, incinerated and checked, but it never happened. Maybe we got lucky. We believe this was not done on purpose, but rather through gross incompetence of the people that were supposed to burn the bags. But the findings are stunning. Today, I'm asking the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the CIA to investigate how and why such crucial information was hidden, to fire those involved in the cover-up, and to file criminal charges, if appropriate, against these people. Yet concealing China's meddling was only the beginning. The third set of documents we are releasing proves that for many years, Americans were blatantly lied to about the security of our election infrastructure, including electronic voting machines and ballot counting systems, dishonest, almost all. They're vulnerable and they're easily compromised, and people within our government knew that. Tonight, we're publishing a series of previously classified U.S. intelligence community assessments and other reports proving that our government has long known these machines are extremely exposed to attack. As one assessment states, we judge that the United States adversaries, including at a minimum Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, as well as non-state groups, have the capability to compromise U.S. election infrastructure. That's unquote, but that's some statement, isn't it, made by supposedly great patriots of our country. The document goes on to further state that, quote, we assess that centralized election-related data repositories, such as voter registration databases, poll books, and other official election websites, are most vulnerable to exploitation, and adversaries could use this access to these systems to disrupt election processes within the United States of America. Tonight, we're releasing all of those findings, and spanning from January 2020 to June 2026. This is a cyber threat aimed at the very heart of our democracy. Many people have questioned whether it could actually be possible to electronically manipulate vote totals or change election results on these terrible machines. Today, we are releasing documents that show the CIA obtained reporting of a specific plot to do a big number in favor of the corrupt Maduro regime in Venezuela. And that's exactly what happened, conspiring to digitally rig their own country's elections in 2020, and that's what they did. This reporting included precise details about methods to regime develop to digitally alter vote totals in ways that could not be detected even with an audit, no matter how deep they went. This intelligence underscores why we must take urgent action to ensure that our own system can never, ever be hacked or compromised like it was in the past. The fourth set of documents reveals that even when significant evidence of fraud has been detected, it has been buried and covered up. Among the disclosures tonight are FBI files detailing evidence of alleged fraud by a large-scale voter registration operation in Michigan. In 2020, Michigan State Police raided a Democrat Get Out the Vote organization, corrupt group in Muskegon. And we're so concerned by what they found. They were just so concerned. They couldn't believe it, actually, that they contacted the FBI in Detroit. The documents state that some canvassers admitted to FBI agents that they signed voter registration forms in other people's names, submitted fraudulent registration for people who did not exist, and received gift cards tied to their number of applications that they produced. In other words, it was pay, play, and cheat. The FBI agents working on the case believe that crimes were committed, yet the Biden Department of Justice slow-walked the investigation and killed it. Tonight, I'm asking the FBI director to ensure that the matter is fully investigated and to work with the Department of Justice to prosecute those responsible for any crimes. Finally, to reveal just how vulnerable our elections continue to be, we are releasing the results of a stunning investigation by the Department of Homeland Security. According to the DHS review, state voter rolls and public records, they identified approximately 278,000 non-citizens who are registered to vote in federal elections. Since Democrat states refuse to share their voter files, the real number is actually much higher than that. Yet, even this limited analysis found more than 250,000 foreigners illegally registered to vote. Put together, these disclosures reveal an election system so broken and so vulnerable that no one can possibly defend it. It is not defensible. Hundreds of millions of U.S. voter files are in the hands of foreign governments. Our machines and ballot counting systems are exposed to hacking and manipulation and corruption. China and other countries have been trying to meddle in our elections. Evidence of fraud has been buried. Hundreds of thousands of non-citizens and dead people are listed and active on the voter rolls, and yet we still have elections with no voter ID, no proof of citizenship, and tens of millions of ballots floating aimlessly through the mail. As one example of the insanity, California's recent election for mayor of LA and governor was held on June 2nd, a long time ago, but it was just completed a few days ago on July 10th. Think of that, much more than 1 month. Took a month to count the votes. I wonder what they were doing. This is worse than any third world country. There's no third world country that has elections like we have. In a rare move, NBC and ABC Fake News have both said that they would not cover this speech. They knew what it was about because of the fact that they don't like the topic, because they know how corrupt our system is and they don't want to reveal it. They and others in the media are part of a plot. They want to continue this fraud for whatever reason. They want to keep it going. They want to protect the radical left. They can't have a great country, and that's true. You can't have a great country without free and fair elections. Fraud like this should mean a revocation of their licenses They use our public multi-billion-dollar in value airways for absolutely no money. They pay nothing. All we want is honesty in our elections and honesty in reporting. They pay nothing for multi-billion-dollar assets. Great damage has been done to our country. Our elections were left vulnerable to being rigged and stolen, and the trust of the American people was lost. This cannot be allowed to continue. Every American, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, or otherwise, should be able to agree that we deserve the most secure, honest, and fair election system anywhere in the world. Secure elections should be a partisan, really, we should be together, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everybody, and it should not be a partisan issue. It should cause to unite us, not to divide us. This should be a cause. We should be united, not divided. In light of the brand new and irrefutable information I have revealed tonight, my administration is in the process of notifying the states whose election data was compromised by the People's Republic of China and many others. We will be working closely to mitigate any harm, and we're taking swift action to ensure that sensitive voter data is better protected so we can never be bought, we can never be hacked, and we can never watch a stolen election again. Tomorrow, the Secretary of Homeland Security will hold a briefing to outline his department's recent work confirming cyber vulnerabilities in our electronic voting systems. They are bad. We're in the process of informing governors, senators, and members of Congress of potential issues in their states. If you look at voting today, it's in such bad shape in so many states, and we are committing to fix it. And we're also committing to be working with those states and local jurisdictions to help them fix and patch known technical vulnerabilities before the midterm elections. We have very important elections coming up. We want those elections to be honest. I've also ordered DHS to notify every state about non-citizens on their voter rolls and direct them to remove all ineligible voters from the lists immediately. But most importantly, addressing this crisis of election security demands that Congress must pass the Save America Act. How easy is that to do unless you want to cheat? The only reason you wouldn't do it is you want to cheat because your policies are so bad and your candidates are so pathetic that you can't get away or can't get elected any other way. This landmark bill requires that all voters must show photo voter ID. How simple is that? Could I have your photo, please? Photo voter ID. All voters must provide proof of citizenship. Are you a citizen of our country, please? And hopefully there will be no corrupt mail-in ballots, which if you watched California and so many other places, mail-in ballots are inherently corrupt. So you would have no mail-in ballots except for illness, disability, military deployment, or travel if you're going away on business or vacation. These reforms are urgently needed to stop the vulnerabilities that I've mentioned. To all Americans, I ask you to pick up your phone tomorrow, call your representatives in the House and Senate, and demand that they pass the Save America Act without delay. Together, we will restore faith and confidence in our country, and we will be bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. Thank you. God bless you. God bless our great military. And God bless America. Thank you very much.
Go ahead. Now. Okay. The president from the East Room, incredibly powerful. The 5 elements. Let me go to Brian Kennedy. I got Damon Roberts. We're going to get back to Gruber, hopefully get Poso and Cleta from London. We're going to do it all tonight. How about that? Brian Kennedy. Very powerful, sir.
I thought it was a home run, Steve. This was he hit every single thing that we have been discussing here on the War Room for 6 years. He talked about the vulnerability of the machines. He talked about mail-in balloting. He talked about every single common sense thing that has been part of this story that we've all been living through. I have never been more proud of President Trump than I was tonight. He really showed that they are prepared to declassify a whole lot of documents and be thousands of pages that tell this story.
Let's put this in perspective. I think they've gone through 11.5 million pages. They've declassified, and that's part of the effort. This is Solomon and Pulte in the team, this task force. Think of what they've accomplished. Every element he talked about is backed up by documents from the intelligence agencies or DHS that heretofore have been suppressed. That's the stunning thing about it. Whether you're talking about the Chinese intrusion, or you're talking about the machines, any process you talk about, it's there. They're providing the backup documentation, including down to individual FBI agents who are quoted as saying, "I'm running a shadow government here." The brazenness of the intelligence community, the deep state, as President Trump referred to them, every element was predicated upon things that the task force found, or that Pulte found, that John Solomon's group found, or Pulte found it. That's what led to the 5 elements. These are the 5 different areas, including really breathtaking information about the Chinese Communist Party, which, as we have said at the Committee on the Present Danger, which you're one of the co-founders, and we've said on the War Room virtually every day since the inception of the show, is the mortal enemy of the United States of America. And he brought up all these details about the Chinese, from journalists to businessmen to getting all the voter data, to be able to manipulate the voter data. It's just absolutely stunning. And all this was withheld from the American people for years and years and years. And if it hadn't been for these 2 patriots and President Trump having the cojones to appoint them and take all the grief afterwards, we wouldn't see it tonight.
No, that's absolutely right. He did a fabulous job with that. And look, as soon as those documents come out, I'm working with teams of people who are going to go through those documents and actually tease out from all of them all this information. As you said, this is just the start of the story. Once we actually have our hands on those documents, there'll be a much, much bigger explanation of what transpired here. And I was extremely proud that he went after the Chinese Communist Party and them going after him. He knows, President Trump, that they were going after him in 2018, in 2019, and 2020, and they're still going after him today. This is the start of a major political war that the American people need to understand, Steve.
Yes.
Yes. It's Donald Trump and the American people versus the Chinese Communist Party. And their associates and their associates and acolytes here in the United States on the payroll or not. Brian, hang on one second. I do want to go to London with Cleta Mitchell because it's quite late there. Cleta, thank you for joining us, and thank you for all your efforts in making this evening happen, ma'am. Your thoughts?
Well, I couldn't agree more with you and Brian. I mean, the most startling thing to me is that, we think that the Hunter Biden laptop story was horrendous and how they kept the truth from the American people. But imagine our government, our intelligence community knew in January of 2020 that the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese government had stolen millions, 200 million voter records, or however many there were, and that they kept that information from the President of the United States, from the key people in his administration, kept it from Congress, and kept it from us. But let me mention one other thing let's think about this for a moment. You have 2 news networks who do not think that it is of sufficient importance to the American people that this attack on our country occurred to air the president's speech. Now, I find that, as someone who has fought with these legacy Marxist media for 5 years, 6 years, this is still astonishing to me. We have Mark Elias, the leader of the pro-corrupt elections cabal who started on Monday. The moment it was announced the president was going to give a speech, he started on Monday saying, it's all lies, don't believe any of it. What is that about? Hasn't seen the first document. But let me tell you one thing that I want to mention to everybody. And the reason I want to mention this is because something happened in 2020 in the election that I've been around elections for decades. I'd never seen this before. When I was in Georgia in the post-election, we had all of these reports that had been called in to the Republican Party headquarters in Atlanta, telling us reports of people who had shown up to vote on election day and had been told, oh, Mrs. Smith, we show that you've already voted by mail. To which Mrs. Smith would respond, I never vote by mail. I did not vote by mail. Well, Mrs. Smith, we have to give you a provisional ballot if you can prove to us that you didn't cast this ballot. But by then, of course, the ballots are already counted. The mail ballots have already been processed. There's no way to find Mrs. Smith's ballot. I thought that just happened in Georgia. I was giving a speech in August of 2021 in Virginia to our first election integrity summit in Virginia in 2021. And I was telling this story and I said, this is a strange thing that happened in Georgia. All these hands shot up in the crowd saying, it happened here. It happened here. Steve, I have never seen that before or since. And I am wondering, and of course, we couldn't talk about the election. We couldn't talk about the evil things that happened. We couldn't talk about the anomalies because we were the crazy people. They called us names, the election deniers. I am wondering if the Chinese, with all of those records that they misappropriated, that they stole, I am wondering if they're the ones, if that is why we heard of these stories of people showing up at the polls and being told they'd already voted. It happened in state after state after state. I don't even know how many people were involved in losing their vote, because once somebody else votes in your name, how do you prove a negative? How do you prove that wasn't me? So people who showed up, they didn't get to vote. That's massive vote suppression. So I think that there is so much here. But what I think is most interesting is after 5.5 years of gaslighting by the Mark Elias, by the left-wing Democrats, media, telling us we're the ones who are crazy. Now they don't want to talk about this. We're not supposed to talk about it because they don't. I wonder, what did they know and when did they know it? And how big a part of this whole process
the cover-up,
for some of these high-ranking Democrats.
The cover-up's got to be investigated. We got to get to the bottom of that. People have to be arrested, of course, but the deep state people have to be fired. Perp walked out. But the burning action right now is what must be done. 100 and some days from now, we're going to be voting. Early voting starts on 18 September in 60 days. It's too late for the Save America. Save America Act is fantastic. If we could magically pass it overnight and start to execute on it, maybe. But I believe the president's got to take the Save America Act and put it in a national security emergency executive order or some instrument that can be acted upon today with action, action, action. He's just told you the system is completely broken. It's open to hacking. It's open to manipulation. You have foreigners in there. You have members of the deep state that are protecting this. 5.5, 6 years afterwards, we're finally getting this information after Herculean effort by yourself, by people like John Solomon, like Bill Pulte. If you didn't have Bill Pulte and John Solomon, okay, whatever Pulte's shortcomings are as an intelligence expert, he's a hero and patriot for unearthing this and getting to the bottom and forcing the CIA, who didn't want to do it, and the media who tried to mock it and ridicule it, to force it to come. That's why, what's your recommendation to the president, because he listens to you, about what immediate action we have to take to make sure the midterms are going to be stolen just like every other election is stolen?
Well, let me just say this. One of the things that we have, it's kind of an interesting irony, isn't it, Steve? Remember that Jay Johnson, who was the Obama Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, in January of 2017, as he was leaving office, remember when they were starting the whole Russia collusion hoax? Jay Johnson added elections to the list of critical infrastructure. So now elections, not election systems, not election voting machines, elections writ large, they are defined under our law as critical infrastructure. So guess what? When there is a known threat to America's critical infrastructure, DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, is the sector risk management agency, meaning DHS is obligated by law to take steps to mitigate the known threats, the known vulnerabilities. To me, that gives the Department of Homeland Security not only latitude, but the responsibility, the duty to take steps to mitigate the threat. So I don't think the president has to declare a national emergency.
You're saying you don't need. You're saying there's enough authority out there right now to go do this. There's enough authority to do it if you execute, if you demand it.
Yes, there are obligations on the Department of Commerce. Remember, there's not a voting system in America that is not made in whole or in part by a foreign adversary. China, either they're manufactured completely in China or component parts in China. The Department of Commerce has an obligation under the law to take steps to make certain that any technology transfer from a foreign adversary can't occur.
Chris Krebs was appointed by President Trump. Chad Wolf was his boss. Chris Krebs went on 60 Minutes and said this was the most secure election in the history of the country, and his boss, Chad Wolf, signed off on it. What should happen to those two? Off the top of the head, those two, what should happen to them?
Well, see, here's what we don't know from the documents, Steve. I don't know this, but I wondered, I actually thought about that today. So we don't know whether the CIA and we don't know whether they, I rather doubt that they did, but we don't know. Did they tell Chris Krebs? Did they tell Chad Wolf? Because they were obligated under the law to do that. If they didn't tell them, well, maybe they thought that everything was fine.
Let's say they withheld it. Let's say they withheld it. Krebs' job was the head of cybersecurity. He doesn't need the CIA to tell him. It's his job to know. The CIA should tell him. There's a massive cover-up in the deep state, and that's got to be addressed either by a special prosecutor or somebody. But Chris Krebs is responsible. You know, Chris Krebs didn't go on CBS 60 Minutes and say, you know, the CIA did this or this did this. He said, I am the head of cybersecurity for the election, and this was the most secure election. And we had our nose rubbed in that for year after year after year. Chris Krebs, to me, better have some pretty good excuses or he should be in prison. The same with Chad Wolf. Chad Wolf ought to have either have a damn good excuse or he should be held accountable. The people in the Trump administration that were either too feckless, too hapless, or part of it, including Chris Wray, the entire crowd, Bill Barr, all of them ought to go to federal prison. This is outrageous. We're either going to save this country. We're either going to save this country, or we're going to play pity pat.
Or we're not.
We're going to play pity pat. You're going to have people stealing elections every day, and the American people and the MAGA movement have got a belly full of it. Tonight was extraordinary. The documents are there. There'll be more documents coming out. But now we need an action plan. And pass Save America is not it. They're not going to pass it up there. That's right. No, their great idea is to allocate $10 billion of a $350 billion bill. We don't have the money, and to try to bribe the blue states into participating. They're never going to do it because they only exist as a political power because they steal elections. They don't care about the money. They don't care about a couple of $1 billion here or there. We're going to have to, you can't pass Save America, you agree, if we can't pass Save America, we must implement the parts of Save America that are there that must be implemented. And somehow, if we send a guy to the moon, we can implement those elements between now and Election Day, ma'am?
Look, it's more than Save America. It's so much more. I mean, I love the Save America Act. I was involved in helping to write it. It's, I basically kind of started this whole Only Citizens Vote effort 3 years ago. But there's so much more we have to do. We need to be voting on security, paper, pre-printed ballots, hand marked. We need to do that. That can be done. It can be done. It can be done between now and the election. We need to make certain that if there are electronic tabulators, that you have a process whereby you reconcile that the number of votes the ballots cast match the number of voters. Do you realize that they don't even do that? There were 100,000 more ballots or more votes in Pennsylvania in 2020 than there were voters. Same in Michigan, same in Fulton County. We can't have that. There are steps that can and must be taken, that can be required. We should not.
And
the Department of Justice should go in
your election
immediately.
integrity network is getting into these documents, and we'll be able to talk to you tomorrow about this.
We hope so. I've been asking every day this week, when can we have access to the documents? They're supposed to be put on a public website.
I think they're put up right now. I think the president said they're going live right now on the White House. We'll make sure Rav assists you in this. Cleta, where do people go for Election Integrity Network in your social media?
Go to, we have a new website that's going live tonight. It's called electionbelievers.com. Make elections believable again. .com. Electionbelievers.com and electionintegritynetwork.org. We want people to come to our website. We want people looking at the documents. We want people reporting if they know people that were deprived from their votes, from voting when they showed up to vote in 2020. We want to document it all. We want people engaged in this. We have state coalitions. We can use your help. This is an all hands on deck to save our elections and to save our country. You can follow me at Cleta Mitchell on X and also at EI Watchdogs, also on X. But we got a lot of work to do, and we're going to be putting out information and getting people involved and telling people how they can help. And it's going to take all of us, because just look what they did tonight. 2 news networks didn't cover this. The left has been screaming all week that nothing to see here.
But hang on. Fox covered it, and as soon as it was over, because we monitor Fox, as soon as it was over, Hannity had some mumbo jumbo about this. He was in the mumble tank, didn't want to talk about it. Because remember, Fox wrote an $800 million check. Why did Fox write an $800 million check with this information? Rupert Murdoch and that crowd, they can go. They search the earth for anything. You're telling me they couldn't get to the bottom of this? No, they didn't want to get there. They wrote him an $800 million check. And so what Hannity did is pivoted. You know, he's talking about his favorite topic, bombing Iran. The Murdochs and Fox News are the propaganda arm for the eternal war business, right? The eternal, because it's good for business.
Well, Steve,
he pivoted.
You may remember,
yes, ma'am.
I used to appear on Fox relatively, not all the time, but pretty frequently, particularly on election, campaign finance, and all. I haven't been on Fox since the week after the November election of 2020. And because they don't want to talk about, there is a rule they will not discuss election integrity. They gagged themselves. They paid all that money to Dominion.
They want to write an $800 million check to the perpetrators.
That's right.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it, Murdochs.
E-poll books. There are so many things that we need to do, and we've got a model election laws handbook. Yeah. We've got the blueprint. We'll help. We just need somebody. We're not going to get to the model. What we got to do is we got to shut down. We got to shut down the ability to cheat in the next 90 to 100 days, or you ain't going to have a country. Anyway, Cleta, thank you so much, ma'am. We'll track you down tomorrow as you guys go to work on this. Thank you. Thank you for staying up late. Jack Posobiec, the Chinese Communist Party. You're a naval intelligence officer. That was your specialty. Been exposed, and more documents are going to come out every day about their involvement. It doesn't shock you, Poso, because you know they declared a people's war on us in May of 2019 and then launched pandemic. So it wouldn't shock you to know that they've been trying to get in and manipulate the 2020 election to thwart John Trump and put Biden in office.
Oh, Steve, there's no question. And after what we've heard from the President of the United States regarding this direct attack, again, and let's use the language of MSNBC here. Now, this was an attack on our democracy. This was the greatest attack on our republic since 9/11, and it was done so by the Chinese Communist Party. And so, as such, we should start by seeing an immediate ratchet up to 100%, 1,000% on all Chinese goods. That should happen tomorrow. President Trump drops that down. drops the hammer on the Chinese Communist Party, then you watch how fast things change. You watch the guys overall, because the first people are going to start calling them is going to be Wall Street. Then you're going to start hearing members of the party. You might even get Xi Jinping on the phone, right? That's how you actually enact change in this country, and you do something for the American worker. China has to pay for what they did to us in COVID. They have to pay for the bio weapon that came out of that Wuhan lab and the damage that it did to our country. And there's obviously a number of people like Dr. Fauci and others need to pay for on that score. There's no question. But we keep going back the Chinese Communist Party, and they've been doing it for 20 years. It's time for President Trump to make the stand.
Jack, you come out of Intel, naval intel, which I happen to think is the best and the most squared away. Having worked with all of them, I say that. I think naval intelligence is just fantastic. I've got to ask you a question. I think what's most shocking, I need you to put it in perspective. Every one of the five elements came from documents from either the intelligence community, the CIA, or the FBI, where they were actively either working with the enemy or suppressing the information from ever coming out over years and years and years, including this Michigan situation, which is the one that Jim Hoft and these guys have been working on for years. Now we know that the FBI, as they said, we can't figure out why the FBI is not interested in this. We know the FBI knew about it and was suppressing it. In fact, they've got an email, I think, from one of the participants saying at the FBI at a senior level saying we're running a shadow government to make sure that we can suppress information from getting to Trump. Every element of this, Jack, came from the intelligence community. And if it wasn't for Pulte, and if it wasn't for John Solomon and the task force, and this is just after 3.5 or 4 weeks, this is what they've got. I know there's more coming out, but what are your thoughts about that? This is systemic. This is not one or two bad guys. This is systemic. And so what needs to be done about it, sir? You're an expert in this area.
Steve, that's exactly right. And what Bill the Bulldog Pulte, what we promised he would do, he is now already delivering in terms of this. And of course, the great John Solomon, our colleague over there on the task force. And I am actually also hearing, as a matter of fact, as of right now, that there are potentially more documents, more things that have been discovered, but are actually still working their way through the process. And the way that we should actually look at this is just the first tranche of declassifications. Remember, they've only been on the job for about 3 weeks now. We're already getting boom, boom, boom. And what I hope to see and what I expect to see here is that this is going to start coming faster and more voluminous with each declassification drop. And so I know for sure that other things have been found. I couldn't tell you exactly what the timeline is, the time frame. They've got to go through a lot of these things. And a big piece of this that I'm told, and I did partake in some of the, I was briefed on some of the material here, that they went around to all the intelligence directors, Steve, as you said, and they said, you see this document? Is this document from your organization, your agency, whichever it is, your bureau, your directorate? Does this comport with your findings? Do you sign off on this? Every single one of the intel heads signed off. So Ratcliffe has signed off on this. DHS has signed off on this. You got, of course, Kash Patel who signed off on this. But Steve, this is the exact same thing that now my beat, of course, is usually more the left-wing violence. But we knew that the FBI and Chris Wray were lying about Antifa in 2020. We knew for a fact that he was lying about it. He lied to the president about it in the Oval Office. I reported that in my book all the way back in 2021, along with Bill Barr, because they had the names, they had the networks, they had the financiers, they had all of it, and they sat there and they did nothing.
Jack, I know it's late where you are, and I'm going to let you go and track you down tomorrow and over the weekend, but you were very smart in your framing when you first came on. You weren't saying that tongue in cheek. You used the very language that we've been hammered on since January 6th of 2021, that this is the greatest direct attack on democracy ever. Talk to me about why'd you frame it like that?
Well, let's go with the greatest direct attack on democracy, because, I'm over here, we're doing CPAC UK, and I had a BBC reporter come up and ask me, they said, well, you said CPAC is an attack on democracy. What is that? And I said, no, I'm repeating what you guys have said since 2020. You've said that we are the anti-democracy. You've said that we are an attack on democracy, that Donald Trump's election is an attack on democracy, that Donald Trump asking for a fair tabulation of the ballot to the will of the American people is an attack on democracy. That's the joke. And now we come to find that the Chinese Communist Party played a role, and it sounds like a fairly significant role, in undermining our democracy in 2020. So, okay, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and use the standard that was set for us by the New York Times, by the Wall Street Journal, by the Washington Post, by the BBC, by CNN, all the rest of them. Attack on democracy. All right, we have an actual attack on democracy. How is this country going to respond? Are we going to get the indictments? Are we going to get the targeting? Remember what they did to Russia. Remember what they did to Russia in 2017 and 2018 with the special counsel. We do need a special counsel on this, by the way. And it should be something where, look, even if we don't have the prosecutions on the table right now, President Trump said if prosecutions will be pursued where applicable, but we know that we can take measures for Americans to receive the remuneration that they deserve from the Chinese Communist Party. And the easiest way to do that, the president can do it right now with tariffs. And by the way, let's go see if the Supreme Court, if all the folks want to up there, if Amy Coney Barrett wants to look at this and say, do you agree that the Chinese Communist Party attacked our democracy and that's why they're getting these punitive tariffs? It's really simple.
Jack, real quickly, do you foresee the state visit with Xi coming to Washington, D.C. in late September, sir?
Well, that's actually something I was thinking about because we know the president had just gone over to Beijing. We know that Xi Jinping is on his way. If I'll put it this way, if that goes on, that's going to be telling a lot. And that's going to be telling the fact that the Chinese are suddenly realizing that they don't have all the cards. The Americans have always been the ones who have all the cards because we have the money. We have the American people. We have the consumer base that they want access to. And if we deny that to them and actually start putting our supply chains and putting our manufacturers back to work, Peter Navarro, of course, has been on this for decades, then guess what? We can sink them because we are the ones who paid for the rise of the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Republic of China. And when I say we, I mean the financiers, the lords of easy money on Wall Street are the ones who paid for it and underwrote it. What was upholding it, of course, was the work and the intense labor of the American people. So disintermediate the system, disrupt the system. That's what tariffs do. And this is the perfect reason to do so.
Jack, where do we go on social media to find you on Twitter?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. We're up on X at Jack Posobiec, Truth Social, Getter, and of course, Telegram.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for staying up late tonight. Tell everybody CPAC London we love them. Thank you, sir. Let's go to the White House while we got him. We got that thing Fitton's calling in. Let's go to Steve Gruber. You and Neil McCabe. We'll start with you, Steve, first. Your thoughts on all this?
Well, I think it's interesting. I'm trying to wrangle John Solomon out of CBS News down the way, which ironically ran the speech tonight, Steve. And honestly, what I heard here tonight, what I heard Frida Mitchell say is incredibly important because she pointed out that Jay Johnson, during the Obama administration, classified voting systems as critical infrastructure. You don't need an executive order. You don't need to do something, an emergency order. You can just say, look, it's critical infrastructure. It's under attack from the Chinese Communist Party, the People's Republic of China, as the president put it tonight. But the thing that stuck out to me was the reference to Barack Obama, because he's been involved in orchestrating much of this. As we know, it goes back to before Trump took the oath of office in his first term. So we have to look at what is his involvement. And I like to go back. Jack says an attack on democracy. That's an important thing. Another thing that Democrats and these networks like to say is nobody is above the law. Boy, I agree with that. You mentioned some names, Chad Wolf, Chris Wray, Bill Barr. Nobody's above the law here. If you were in the intelligence community and you had this information and you sat on it or actively tried to hide it or put it in burn bags, as the president pointed out,
yes.
They found all these burn bags through complete incompetence.
I think the burn bags.
Right?
I think the burn bags will be very interesting. By the way, the reason I put out those people, it's bad enough the evil that's in the deep state, and we got to lance the boil. But these people appointed by President Trump, Bill Barr, Chris Wray, Chad Wolf, Krebs, who went on CBS, right at the height of this and says the most secure election, which they rubbed our nose in it every single day. Steve, real quickly, the Michigan situation. This is one Hoft and these guys have worked on for years. This is pretty explosive. The FBI knew it was a crime and would not pursue it, sir.
Well, here's the thing. The Michigan State Police investigated that. 10,000 applications for ballots found in the city of Muskegon. The president was right about the spot. Here's the problem. You've got the Michigan State Police run by, if I may be so bold, a lackey. The guy that ran Gretchen Whitmer's security detail, she elevated several ranks up to make him the guy in charge of the Michigan State Police at the time that investigation or sham investigation was going on. They never completed the job. That's a fact. They never completed the job. Everybody that's been watching that case, including myself and Michigan News Source and other agencies inside Michigan, know they never completed the job. And we know that the investigation is incomplete. Well, tonight, Donald Trump says they're reopening that with Kash Patel and the FBI. And so we really hope that that's true because, look, it's not just that. It was the work at the TCF Center in Detroit. It was shutting down the ballot counting in Atlanta, Georgia, and Fulton County, and the list goes on. We need to hold people accountable. And the president said it several times. Arrest those and investigate those that are deserving of it. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said. Go find the people that broke the law, hold them accountable, show the American people that, as the Democrats like to say, nobody is above the law.
Gruber, what's your social media? Where do people go?
At Steve Gruber Show. At Steve Gruber Show. All the normal places.
Thank you, brother. Neil McCabe. Is Neil McCabe there? Can I get Neil McCabe? Or I'll come back to Neil McCabe. Are you right there? Give me your thoughts.
No Neil yet.
No Neil.
He's got to swap it over to him.
Okay, fine. Let's go to. Can we go to Sally Grubbs?
Yes.
I want to go to my Georgia contingent. Sally Grubbs, you've worked for 5 or 6 years. Your thoughts tonight, and this is just the first tranche of going to be document after document after document. Your thoughts, ma'am?
Steve, I thought that it was a fantastic speech. One of the things that I really was impressed by is the amount of care that President Trump took in saying, we deserve free and fair elections in America. It really came to me as being a speech that was to all Americans. It was not a partisan speech of the Republicans deserve more than someone else or anything like that. Steve, it was very much a heartfelt speech. I think it's stunning the amount of information that came out about China. There was a lot of content in there that maybe your average person who's not involved in elections might not have picked up on, that was very telling to me personally in working in elections and being on the Georgia State Election Board. I can tell you that there was a lot of content there. There's more than meets the eye. I noticed that he said that there were letters that were going to be going out to states, and I look forward to seeing what states receive a letter and what states are told to address the issues. We know that we have a lot of issues in Georgia, and there was an article that came out that continues to call us election deniers, and I appreciate President Trump standing behind the things that we know are facts. We know that we have people voting in our elections that shouldn't. And I want to address something that Cleta said that I think is imperative, which is when she went to Virginia and there were people that said that they had already voted and she thought it only happened in Georgia. I need Cleta to know, and hear me now, that continues to happen in Georgia elections where people go to vote and they have their card to go into the machine, which we should not have, but to go into the machine and it says that they've already cast a ballot by absentee ballot. That is still happening in Georgia. It happens every election. I get phone calls from people that say they showed up to vote and they were told they already voted and they did not vote absentee.
This is where the manipulation of those files came. The Chinese Communist Party got one of the most sophisticated hacking operations in the world. So many people I know in Georgia and in other, but really in Georgia said, hey, they went to vote and they were just told, hey, you already voted. And they go, well, that's impossible. I couldn't have possibly voted. But they were told they were voted. This is one of the things that the Chinese did with this cyber hacking, ma'am.
Steve, it happens all the time. And the problem is that when the people go to the poll clerk and they say, hey, this card's not working, and then they say, oh, well, you just got a card that had not been cleared. We need to get you a new card. And then they end up provisionally voting. And voters don't know the difference. They don't understand what provisional voting means. And they don't. And like Cleta said, how do you prove a negative? How do you prove you didn't vote? I mean, it is a broken process. We have got to get rid of the machines. These ballot marking devices, we don't need. It needs to be exactly what Cleta said. We need to have the ballots with the ovals, fill in the ovals, and let's be done with it. Let's have free and fair elections. And Cleta was exactly right. Christina Bobb was exactly right. These people were right on point, Steve. And I'm really looking forward to these documents that are posted on the White House website. I can guarantee you I'll be coming through those documents to see what they say. But this has been a long time in coming. The thing is, we have got to get it fixed. We've got to get it right because we've got so many people that are being disenfranchised by illegals voting in our elections and, the voter roll situation.
Sally, I got to go to John Solomon. What's your social media? How do people find out this massive fight you're having down in Georgia at the election boards?
At first vice chair, Georgia GOP. I'm also the first vice chair of the Georgia GOP. You've got my socials right there.
Sally Grubbs is a perfect example of like the Patriots in 1775 and 1776. She was just an average citizen, got involved. Now she's on the Georgia Election Board and one of the great patriots leading this fight in the country. Sally, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you.
Thank you,
Always.
Steve.
Fitton's calling now. We get to Fitton in a moment. John Solomon is with us. John Solomon, I think I can speak for the country to thank Bill Pulte and yourself and your task force, what you accomplished, this speech tonight on the work that you guys have done in the last, 3.5, 4 weeks after 6 years of this nonsense, as we now know goes even back that maybe to 2018 or before, is just nothing short of monumental and heroic. So I first off, want to give you guys a thanks for giving the president finally the information from the intelligence to do it. Tell us about it. What did you think of the speech?
Yeah, first off, President Trump deserves the credit for allowing this to happen. The intelligence officers who work day in and night, I've had people working 18 hours a day to get this work done. They deserve the credit. They found this stuff. I don't have a security clearance, so they go get it. And then we figure out what makes sense for the American public and we release it. Tonight's the opening salvo. It's the beginning of a longer exfiltration of information in the intelligence community. But what's important about tonight is to understand actionable intelligence, things that actually affected our security of our elections were not being told to the president. They were not being told to Congress. Policymakers couldn't make a decision because bureaucrats decided they were more important than a president or a congressman. And I'm very concerned about that ethos because if it does it in elections, what about a foreign power, a war? What if someone doesn't want to tell the president about something else? There's a cultural stain in the intelligence community that this data shows. Now, we're going to have to go back and look at other issues and see if this was a pattern in other forms of intelligence.
John, is there some effort by the intelligence community in this process over the last 4 weeks? I mean, as I've been telling people, to do this in 3.5 or 4 weeks and to you review, I think 10.5 or 11 million pages of classified documents and declassify the thousands you declassified to back up this speech is monumental in itself.
Yep.
But that means at least there was some scintilla of cooperation by certain elements of the intelligence community. Is that how we're going to take care of this problem, that there are people there that are prepared to work with the president and work with his administration to get to the bottom of this and clean it up?
Absolutely. And I want to point out something that's really important, Steve. Every intelligence chief was extraordinarily cooperative. The NSA director, the CIA director, the FBI director, the Department of Justice and Attorney General Blanche. Everybody cooperated. Everybody dug in. They got a lot on their plate. They got wars and they've got issues all around this country. They're cleaning up crime and solving the border. Secretary Mullen, every single one of them took time and put resources to this to find the documents quickly. Some of the information that we found, the intelligence chiefs themselves said, I didn't know about this. First time I'm seeing it. I should have known about it. I think that's where this mystery starts next, or where it goes next. We need to figure out how actionable intelligence, things that are important, aren't getting to the people who should have it under the Constitution, the people entrusted with our security, the president and Congress. Then we have to figure out why would a case like the one the president mentioned in Michigan not get prosecuted. Then we have to understand, why did we go 6 years with election machines that people knew were vulnerable? I just heard Mark Warner said, oh, I knew the machines were vulnerable. Well, What'd you do for the last 6 years? Earn your salary in the Senate. Go get them fixed. Those are the things that are really troubling. And the truth of the matter is, most of the briefings that the president got didn't have any of this in there. There was one document I saw. It's like 39 really important things that the intelligence community found about China and election meddling in 2020. Only 5 were ever briefed to a president. Only 5. That means 34 very important things that the CIA thought were important. They were being suppressed from a president. That is criminal from a national security standpoint. Now, whether it become criminal in a court of law needs to be determined. But the president, you heard him tonight. I want accountability. CIA director, NSA director, fire those who hid this. FBI director, go out and see if you can prosecute the Michigan case. So this comes with fixes and accountability. And if they do both of that, we enter into the November 26 elections with a lot more confidence that we're having a secure election in 26.
Let me talk about that in a second. We're going to go 2 things. One, this is, given your 4.5 weeks or 4 weeks in doing this, it appears, given all 5 elements, the foundational parts of it were intelligence and or law enforcement information that was suppressed from the president or decision makers at the time. It appears, when you look at the scale of the president's speech and what you guys did, as a first step. This is just the opening. This is the first inning. That it's systemic. It's systemic more than just bad apples. How do you take care of the systemic problem?
Well, you make examples of the bad apples that we've caught. Listen, there are people tonight that made comments in their own text messages and emails that we made public to you, the American people, that said, I created a shadow government to keep this away from people. This is politics. We're keeping this away from the president because it's politics. Another person said, it boggles the mind that we're not giving this to the president and to the Congress. Another person said, I wish I had spoke up. I knew we should have told this to the president, but we didn't. That tells you 2 things. There are some people in the community that had a conscience and were worried about it, and there were others that were deeply involved in suppressing this information. Punishing those who suppress, getting them off our payroll, getting them out of the government, it's a good starting point. Prosecuting people if they violated a law, that's a good start. Fixing the machines is a great start. We're going to have to figure out, Steve, 220 million American voters' files are now in the hands of Chinese spies. How do we mitigate that to make sure that when you show up on election day in 26 or 28 or 30, some Chinese spy hasn't voted for you in advance? And by the way, that's not me making that up. In the CIA assessments, the CIA said once a foreign power gets mass numbers of voter IDs, they can do the following things. They can vote in your name, you show up, and they say you can't vote. They can switch some of your data, and you show up, and like your license doesn't match, you can't vote today, or you have to do a provisional ballot. They could register you in another state. You never know that you voted. You might live in Wyoming, and they voted you in New York. Those things are what the CIA universally assessed with its other intelligence community components. We should have known that, and we should have known it was 220 million. When Equifax lost 147 million files, the entire world was alerted. That company paid hundreds of millions of dollars in fines. We went 6 years, and if Senator Warner did know about it, like he said, shame on him for keeping it a secret. We need to tell the American people, but we got to mitigate that. There has to be security provisions that do that. Maybe real ID licenses are an answer, but tomorrow Secretary Mullen will give us the first fixes to all the things we laid out tonight.
I notice, by the way, the haters in the media, the MSNBCs, are in their full attack mode. But I noticed that others are taking this with an even hand. You actually, before you came on, were over at CBS News. What's your assessment so far? Because 70% of the American people are kind of don't really follow this or don't know much about this. This is their first time hearing from the president. Right. The seriousness of this, the scale of it. What is your sense of how the mainstream media is handling this so far?
Well, ABC and NBC didn't cover it. Shame on them. They've done it for every other president. They didn't do for this president. Someone has to wonder, do they deserve those FCC licenses going forward when they won't cover something from a president that is a major breach of election security? I don't know what to say about those guys other than shame on you. I'm a journalist. You're their journalist. Shame on them. I think the second part is, I sat with a group of reporters today in advance, and we kind of went over the data. They seem to take it seriously. We'll see what the headlines are tomorrow, how they deal with it. By the way, this isn't a one-day story. These documents have days and days and days of great stories in them, things about blackmailing government officials by China, other data breaches unrelated to election integrity that are going to be serious to the American people and also still hidden from the American people. The stuff about Venezuela and the fact that they achieved, at least in a hypothetical environment, hacking a machine. That is an incredible thing. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens. But day one is tonight. It begins with alerting the American people. When a president does a primetime conference, he gets the attention of those everyday Americans that often are too busy to read the fake news.
Last thing, John. I know the president at the end had this amazing call out for the Save America Act. Just given the realities and the day the House is sitting there going, "Hey, we may make it voluntary and put some money in back of it." Isn't the reality that some other action has to be taken, either that we already have authorization for, or either done through some national security emergency? Because we start voting in 60 days. Election day is just over 100 days away. Do we actually have the time to worry about legislative fixes, but we have to get to some sort of action fixes, sir?
That's what Secretary Markwayne Mullins going to have. He has a plan. He's going to brief it at 11 o'clock tomorrow. We should carry that live and watch it. I think he's got a plan for the machines. He's got a plan for voter ID. He's got a plan for non-citizens. I bet you lots of states get lit up tomorrow with letters from the Homeland Security and Justice Department saying, we have 250,000 foreigners on your voter rolls. Get them off before Election Day. When's the last time you heard a number like that or a direction to get them off the voter rolls? Things are happening. I think the president's goal, as he said tonight, everyone who goes to vote starting in October and November with the early voting and then Election Day, they should have the confidence that this election doesn't have a glass chin like the last three elections.
John, social media, where do people follow you?
You bet. Jay Solomon Reports on all media. JustTheNews.com is the website, and I'm lucky enough to follow you every night right here on this great network, except tonight. I was a little preoccupied tonight. Just the News, no noise, right after your great show. Appreciate it, Steve.
By the way, John, historic tonight. Great work. Bravo, Zulu.
Thank
Amazing.
you, sir.
Tell your
Appreciate
team
it.
that.
More
Incredible.
to come. A lot more to come.
Bill Pulte and John Solomon, 4 weeks. Tom Fitton is with us telephonically. Tom Fitton, your thoughts tonight? You've been fighting this fight from day one.
Well, what's frustrating about this, Steve, and John did a great job, obviously, is that the details and the broad strokes of this, have been generally known. The details are astonishing in terms of the vast numbers of voters whose information's been compromised. But why should it be a surprise? This information is generally publicly available to state parties, candidates. It's on the marketplace. So not only China, but all of our adversaries or friends could come backing this information up quite easily. The way to solve this China compromise is to immediately require voter ID in-person voting with citizenship verification. John Solomon highlighted all the ways your votes can be compromised by someone else getting access to the data. Well, the way to combat that most effectively is to show up in person and vote with a voter ID. Is it a perfect solution? No, but it's the best one. My big concern is that the agencies responsible for this cover-up are going to be have been designated as the persons or the agencies who are going to investigate the cover-up by their own agencies. Can the CIA investigate the CIA? Can the FBI investigate the FBI? DOJ investigate the DOJ? I don't think so. And if I were the president, I would tomorrow say, you know what, this is important enough. We need an outside group, not compromised by the institutional protection racket that happens every time an investigation like this commences, to investigate what the FBI knew, what they did, what they didn't do. Same at DOJ and CIA. In terms of the electronic voting machines, come on. Prior to 2020, it was a universal fact that no one trusted the electronic voting machines because they were so easily compromised. Left and right agreed. But when they need to use them in order to supposedly run through all the ballots they were mailing out into the ether, the left changed their tone on it, or changed their tact and position on it completely. So there are a few big issues here. We need the voter ID immediately. We need citizenship verification. We need a serious independent investigation of what we heard tonight. And transparency this is just the beginning of what I think needs to be a transparency tear by the administration.
You're known as a guy of action. We've got a midterm election that's all important upon us. The Save America Act, as you know, is not good. Even with the president calling out in the information tonight, is not going anywhere. Thune and these guys are not going to move it. What then needs to be done immediately, sir, that you can think of to make sure that we have some modicum of a free and fair election in November?
I think the president should explore a way to get the voter ID requirement immediately into this alleged third reconciliation package in a way that makes it a national security necessity as opposed to a modification to our election laws. And the only way we can ascertain, and it's a defense matter as well, and tie it to that in order to get it past the parliamentarian in the Senate. We just can't say this is an election issue anymore. We have to say it's it's a national security issue, and the president should act accordingly. And the DHS should look at these election machines, and if they're not usable because of compromises, then they should be designated as such, and there should be alternative means of voting on Election Day as a result.
Tom Fitton, thank you for joining us. Look forward to having you back on as we go through these documents. Where do people go to Judicial Watch? We had Christina on first early in the show before the speech. Where do people go to get all the fights you guys are fighting?
We're waiting for all the documents. Go to judicialwatch.org. I mean, in the burn bags, we've got a lawsuit waiting. Courts want to know when we're going to get the records. A lot of this stuff still needs to be released. A lot of this is still heavily redacted. We need more information beyond what we're getting, and I think the president would agree with that.
Tom Fitton, thank you for staying up with us tonight. We appreciate that and all the work you guys do at Judicial Watch. You guys are pound for pound the best operation out there, institution. Just incredible. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Tom Fitton's a fighter. Let's go to Neil McCabe. Neil McCabe's still at the White House. Neil, you've been there all day, including in the quiet. How do you think that media that sat there today, seething and jumping on Caroline Leavitt, how do you think they're dealing? How do you think they're handling this? What the president did?
Well, they're trying to choke it down, but just in the few minutes that it took John Solomon to walk over to our camera, he was being harassed by mainstream media, people who are saying that the Chinese only got what they would get if they could buy the same data from MasterCard and Visa. And, Solomon had to stop and sort of correct them. But already they're saying that, hey, yes, there were people, they got registrations. All these people were registered, but none of them actually voted. So, the Democratic talking points are already in the mainstream media's bloodstream. And now it's sort of step two is what do people do with this data? And obviously I've seen that the White House website has crashed. Maybe it's back up now, but there's so much more there that people need to dig into. The House and Senate are actually in session tomorrow, and so maybe we'll see something there. Senator Eric Schmidt from Missouri has said he's concerned. John Thune, the majority leader at the Senate, he has not spoken yet. Senator Tom Cotton has said, obviously, he said if China really did what the president said they did, then it needs to be, investigated. But, according to Senator Mark Warner, all these Senate Republicans already saw it already. They've known about it for years. Nobody ever spoke up. And so I think there's a lot of like, hey, what's going on is going to happen overnight and in the morning where people are going to say, what did they know? When did they know it? And what are we going to do next? I'm really curious because if we don't go to step two, let me just say, Steve, if you don't go to step two, it's vandalism. Go ahead, please.
Here's my point. All five elements is predicated upon intelligence documents, highly classified documents that Pulte and the task force under Solomon have found in 3.5 or 4 weeks. This is just the first inning, but it shows you a systemic problem, right? Whether it's China, whether it's these other issues. You've got a FBI, you have FBI, and you have a CIA that have elements in it, and other institutions, other organizations that are there to suppress the information, whoever's sitting in the Oval Office, particularly when that's Donald Trump and MAGA. That's what's got to be, these documents have to be released. I think more of them have to be unredacted. You've got to see the entire document. So this is the beginning, but there has to be criminal procedures and there has to be investigations of how you get rid of these guys. And quite frankly, I think the people that you ought to start with are the people that President Trump put his faith in, his trust in, were in his administration. You got Bill Barr, you got Chris Wray, you got Krebs. Remember, we've had our nose rubbed in Krebs's mess since the beginning. He and Wolf. Krebs went on, and Wolf allowed him to go on national TV on 60 Minutes and say this was the most secure election in American history. And now we know that was a lie. And we knew it was a lie at the time, but now it's proven with these intelligence reports it was a lie. Those are the people that immediately, I think, have to be held accountable. Neil, your thoughts?
What you're saying is absolutely correct. But also, all of us in this swirl of 2020 have heard that there were deep state personnel and elements who were cooperating with foreign powers, specifically Red China, to take down President Trump. And so that was something that people would whisper about. You wouldn't say it on camera. But now I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute. All that stuff I would talk to people about, it sounds like there's something to it, and it certainly needs to be pursued, that there are Americans involved cooperating. A foreign power can't just walk through and do whatever they want. They have to have someone on the inside.
Neil McCabe, social media. Thank you for staying up late with us. Social media, sir.
You can find me on all the socials at Reporter McCabe.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. Matt Meck, you're head of the Coalition. The Coalition is a group of organizations dedicated to make sure that we have free and fair elections, particularly the one coming up. What would be your recommendation? Hearing what you heard tonight, what would you tell the President of the United States has to be done to make sure that the midterm elections are not stolen, because the Democratic Party has every intention of stealing the 2026 midterms? What would your recommendation be?
Sir, I would say to him, with all due respect, declare a national emergency. I mean, I respect Clayton Mitchell, but DHS can't even get the electrical grid fixed. How the hell are they going to do it to the election system? It's going to take a presidential finding, a national state of emergency to get shit done. So, scars my language, but I'm just so pissed because I'm part of the National Protect the Grid Coalition as well. We haven't done anything for the electrical grid. We need the president to do this. And with all due respect, I know I've sent it to you and others, the coalition, at the behest of some in and around the president, sent up a 17-page document, a proposed draft EO, based on partly the president declaring a national state of emergency to get this right. Because I'm sorry, we can't use machines. As Laura Logan said at several of our summits that she moderated, anybody speak machine language out here? If you don't, how the hell do you know what's going on in the damn machine? You don't.
So you have the 17-page. This is what Tickton and Wayne Allen Root have been alluding to. You actually have the 17-page detail of what needs to be happen. You need, as a predicate, you declare a national security emergency, because this is a national security emergency about a free and fair election, and that's predicated upon the information that's put out tonight and other information that'll be coming out in the next week or so.
Yes, sir. And I would say, much like everybody said, is there a military component to this? I mean, we've been attacked. What the president just said, we've been attacked by a foreign power, a pretty damn important, powerful foreign power. How can this just be DOJ and FBI? I would submit the military's got to be involved in this response in some capacity, Steve.
My understanding is that you have this recommendation of this action plan. Tickton's seen it. Wayne Allen Root's seen it. Other lawyers have seen it, and they've hammered it into something that would pass muster, correct?
Yes, sir. And it encompasses everything from registration to validation to tabulation, the counting, and the reporting, because our system is replete. It has so many attack vectors in it. You can't use it again. And Steve, you were in the military. Remember when we would go in, you had a squadron or battalion, and they said, if your SSN ends in 379, you got a whiz quiz today. Why do our urinalysis in the military have a hell of a lot more focus on integrity and chain of custody than our ballots. That's unacceptable.
Amen. Where do people go to the coalition? I want people to get more, understand more of what you guys are working on, because quite frankly, I think this is the solution. I think it's declaring, you compile more information, particularly about not just what happened, what the vulnerability is still there, but also how the intelligence community and the law enforcement community is compromised. We know they're compromised. We got the documents now. So you're going to have to go to other measures. And part of that measure is declaring a national security emergency and then implementing essentially the Save America Act plus immediately through executive action. So where do people go to find out more about the coalition?
So they can go to unauthorized.one. And folks, I know you and I have been talking about it. If their schedule allows, 10 through 13 September, Ahern Hotel again. And Mr. Ahern's removing that center bar. We're going to get 1,000 people in the Ahern Hotel Storm Summit, 10 through 13 September. And the great Tina Peters' birthday is 11 September. She'll be there.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thanks for staying up with us. Appreciate you guys. Everything the coalition does.
Yes,
a man who I think the coalition has given us at least a framework of an answer that can be executed on immediately. Brian Kennedy, since you're the co-founder of the Clear and Present Danger China, I guess it's more clear and present than ever, sir?
No, it certainly is, Steve. No, what have we been arguing for all these years? That we're in a state of war with communist China. They certainly look at it that way. They certainly believe that they're in a war with us. And I think tonight President Trump acknowledged that. And he acknowledged it in part because they were going after him. And they were going after the American people and their ability to vote. And certainly we need to investigate what's happening, what's happened in the past, but also what's going to happen in the future. And you're absolutely right. We need to come up with a plan that will pass constitutional muster. But we also can't be constrained by the Constitution in this sense, that the Constitution is not a suicide pact. And just because states are responsible for running elections doesn't mean when they demonstrate time and again that they can't do it correctly and honestly, that everyone just sits by and lets it happen. If we knew for an absolute fact that an election was going to be stolen by some foreign power, what would we do? Would we simply throw up our hands and say, well, it's a state issue? Or would we as people decide that the executive, the commander-in-chief, should do something about it? We're now at a point where we're having demonstrated to us an election can be stolen. That when the president said there's 220 million, records, that's everybody, right? There's only 220 million voters in America. Everybody's election record was stolen, which is what you'd expect the communist Chinese to do if they're at war with us. Either we're going to take this information that our elections are vulnerable and do something about it, or we're going to sit back and watch another election be stolen. The logic of what the president said is that you have to ban the voting machines. You have to limit mail-in ballots to only those, handful of discrete exceptions. And we have to have systems in place that are absolutely secure from any foreign power. You do that, you can have a republic again. If you don't do that, the republic's lost, because the other side in America doesn't believe that our republic in the United States is worth defending. They're not willing to defend it from a foreign power like Communist China, which would seek to undermine our ability to govern ourselves. This is the greatest test of our lifetime, to see if we can sustain Republican government in this country. And I believe we're up to the task.
Brian, thank you so much for coming on. I want to have you back on. Well, let's hear what DHS has to say tomorrow. My point with Secretary Mullen, it's got to be a plan that starts to be implemented tomorrow afternoon. And it's got to be on voter ID. It has to be on all these elements. We are burning daylight, and we can't mess around anymore.
He can't deport 25 million people. He can't deport 25 million illegal aliens who have come into this country. Why do we think he's going to be able to secure the elections? That was, the president didn't talk about that, but that was rolled out afterwards, I believe. I think the American people, if they take the president's message to heart, will demand that Secretary Mullen do some very severe things to get this right. And if we're not going to get them right, then what are we doing here? What is the president? What the president has said here is that serious things are going to happen.
And particularly when you have at least a minimum, just for the states, they were able to garner 275,000 illegal aliens or aliens that don't have the right to vote on the voting, that on the voter rolls signed up to vote. It's outrageous. Brian, thank you for staying up late with us. Where do people go for the Committee on the Present Danger China? And where do they go for your social media, sir?
Thank you, Steve. It's at presentdangerchina.org, presentdangerchina.org. And on X, I'm Brian T. Kennedy 1. And on Getter and True Social, it's Brian T. Kennedy. Thank you, Steve. It was great to be with you tonight.
Brian, great, historic night. And I want to thank you. I want to thank everybody that was able to participate. Some people we couldn't get on, and we'll do that all tomorrow morning, starting at 10 o'clock. Of course, Mullen's going to have a press conference at 11. We'll be covering it wall to wall all day. I want to thank Real America's Voice. Particularly, it is the channel that has taken this seriously from day one, correct? I just mentioned that Hannity, pivoted away from talking about this as soon as the president's over. And guess what? We're talking about bombing Iran, the favorite topic over at Murdoch News. I want to thank Rav, and particularly a channel that had someone like John Solomon that heroically stepped in and assisted Bill Pulte. And let's be blunt, if Real America's Voice in the War Room hadn't gotten him back of Bill Pulte, they would have blown him out in a second. The president heroically selected these two individuals to do something that's never been done in American history. Go into the intelligence apparatus, go through highly classified documents, make decisions quickly and smartly and prudently to declassify these documents to show if the 2020 election was fair and, quite frankly, if the elections we have today can be counted upon. We saw this as a systemic problem. You're not going to wave a wand, it's going to go away, but we need to take action. We are burning daylight. And you're going to have MSNBC, oh, these guys want to take over the elections. Well, guess what? We're never going to allow another election to be stolen. Just full stop. Yes, and there's going to be ICE at the polls, and none of your illegal aliens are going to be able to vote. None of the aliens that are here, quote unquote, with these scam, quote unquote, legal methods are going to vote either. We're stopping it all. You cannot remember. Last thing to remember when you leave. If the Democrats don't cheat, they can't win. They know that. That's why they house so much about this. I want to thank everybody, including the Denver crew who stayed up late tonight to cover this. Obviously, everybody over there, Peter Navarro, everybody working at the White House. I want to thank you. We are back in the war room. We're going to go to programming right now at Rav, and we are back in the war room at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time tomorrow morning. We'll see you then.
We'll be right back with more of this special coverage as Trump addresses the nation.
I think when people see the facts, there's no amount of interpretation that the spin doctors can do. It's going to be a very big announcement. I'll leave it at that and let the American people judge, but I think there'll be plenty there.
This has been a live special report. We now join our programming already in progress.